Welcome back, everyone. I'm T,
And I'm Nessa.
and together we are the Casual Fangirls. We're here to discuss the premiere episodes of the new series, Rings of Power. And you heard correctly, we said episodes. Amazon decided to do a two-episode premiere. The show serves as a prequel to The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series and takes place thousands of years before the events of those stories during Middle Earth's Second Age. Rather than go in chronological order, we'll be discussing the episodes according to storylines. If you're familiar with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, you know that there's always a lot happening at the same time, so this just makes the most sense for this story. But before we dive into the specifics, and we just wanted to quickly give our thoughts on like what we thought about being back in Middle Earth and the first two episodes of Rings of Power. So Nessa, I'll let you kick it off. How did you feel about the episode?
I was excited about both episodes. I think they were both very familiar, but still very new to all of us. I was definitely confused, as I usually am, by a lot of these fan stories about whose name is that and who is this person and what do they do and what are their histories? What place are we in? Where are we going? But I was happy to be in different lands and meeting new people and that we're getting different characters, but we also have very familiar characters, right? Like Galadriel and Elrond. These are names that we know very well. And so it's definitely exciting to be back in this world, to be back with them. We've got a diverse cast, and I'm very happy to see that. Um, and it just feels like it's done in an effortless way, and I'm so appreciative of that. I got so excited. And also watching these episodes, it reminded me that like it's kind of funny, but like I feel like Lord of the Rings falls into this category of bougie fantasy where it's
Mm.
like people speak very eloquently, everything looks so beautiful. And like, it's like I don't know how to describe it, but it's different from like more of the realism that we get in things like Game of Thrones or
Mm.
Harry Potter and stuff. And I was like, I kind of miss the bougie high fantasy type world, and I was happy to be back in this world, and it gave me all the good feelings.
As
Um,
a That's a good point. As an example, you're not going to hear Elrond like drop the F bomb or the B bomb, which we've heard.
no,
We've heard the F bomb in Game of Thrones, and we've heard Molly Weasley call someone a B word. So
right, exactly. It's a different stushness going on in
agree.
this world. All right, what words would you use to describe these episodes? How do you feel about the show?
Yeah, so to those at home who don't know, the Lord of the Rings movies and characters is Nessa's favorite. So she is a diehard Tolkien fan with this. I'm a very recent indulger in this story. As in, I watched the movies a couple of weeks ago to prepare for this, and that was my first time digging into it. And just like with those movies, I found this to be very complex.
Hmm.
There's a lot happening at a lot of different
Hmm.
times, and it's kind of difficult to keep up with everything. But I'm intrigued enough to want to learn. I want to learn all the backgrounds of all these main characters that we've been following so far, and for a story to kind of get me that invested up front. And I'll also add that you mentioned that we have some familiar faces, Elrond and Galadriel. It took me maybe 10 minutes into Elrond being on screen to be like, wait, is that the same Elrond we're supposed to be talking about from Lord of the Rings? But even within those 10 minutes, I was invested in what was happening, even though I didn't
Yeah.
connect. And with Galadriel, I didn't connect that was her until after I watched both episodes and was talking with a friend about it. Yeah.
Oh my god,
Yeah. Didn't
that's
even realize
so.
that was her.
They said her name like 20 million, or you just maybe forgot that that was her name in the movies.
So that's the thing in the Lord of the Rings movies when even watching those movies and having her be a good character, I was like, I don't understand why she's important. Like those
Hmm.
movies didn't to me articulate why she was so important. And so I was kind of just sitting around
Fair.
just like thinking about it all and I was just like, wait, something I don't know, something in the back of my brain was just like, that's the same person. And then I asked my friend and he was like, yes, why didn't you pick that up? I was like, I don't know, I don't know why I didn't pick it up. But then it made way more sense. Like even in these first two episodes, without digging into the details just yet, watching Galadriel do what she does, that serves as like kind of the explanation I needed for Lord of the Rings to understand why she was important there.
Yeah,
So I say all that to say I was confused. I eventually caught up, and now I'm kind of like even more locked in now
yeah,
that I understand the connections between the prequel and the story we're used to. So
love
I'm in
that.
it. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, and I think that's what's going to be great about these prequels is that we're going to get to see the journey of how Elrond and Galadriel get to where they are in the Lord of the Rings movies. Because that's a really great point that we don't understand why she's so important, except for that she's the leader of these elves in Lothlorien or whatever.
Was
But like,
she?
she was right.
I mean, I trust
Now
you.
you got me questioning myself. Like, oh, she
So I assumed Elrond was one leader, and then the guy who showed up to help Rohan was the other leader.
So Elrond is the leader in Rivendell,
Okay.
and she's the leader
Oh,
in
they had went
Lothlorien.
they
They
went
went to
somewhere
a
else.
different place. Yeah, there's a lot going on, which is also why I appreciate in the show when they're like, "Here's where we're going," and we're on our way there. Because I
Mm.
think casual viewers and even people like me who are invested, we still need to orient ourselves in this world, and I'm happy that they're doing that. Also, Elrond, aka Young Ned Stark. So, if anybody didn't know that, that's the actor who plays young Ned.
I knew he looked familiar. I was like,
If y'all wanted a Game of Thrones connection, there it is.
so he plays young Ned in the Tower of Joy scene.
Mm-hmm.
I knew he looked familiar, and I was just like, yo, why have I seen him before? Like in my head, I was like, why are they using the same character that they like the same person that they used in the Lord of the Rings movies? But I was like, no, 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 that was Red Skull, aka Agent Smith,
I
who was
get
Elrond.
right.
So like, why am I making this like? I was so okay. Thank you for
There you
clearing that
go.
up because I
You
was
are
like,
very
what is going on
welcome.
here?
Anytime, anytime. All right, guys. So those were our spoiler free thoughts. So now we're gonna get into the episodes. But before we do, T, I need you to kick us off with the spoiler warning, please.
So this is our warning, as if you saw already. We are going to talk about the Lord of the Rings. We are going to talk about The Hobbit. We're going to talk about the first two episodes of Rings of Power. So normally, honestly, this is a pivot for me. We'd say stop right now, go watch the things, and come back. But you know what? Who am I to dictate your life? If you want to sit here and spoil the stories for yourself, by all means, stick around. But just know you've been warned.
Fair, fair. All right, guys. So we are going to start with episode 1 entitled A Shadow of the Past. So, from a young age, we see that Galadriel is an outcast in Valinor, aka the Undying Lands. Some hating-ass kids try to sink her paper boat, and she whoops the little boy, right? Then the ass whooping is put on pause by her brother, who she's clearly very close to. And they have a discussion about dark and light. So she asked him, like, it's not, things are not that black and white, right? It's not just a such thing as evil and lightness. So she's like, well, what happens when it seems like there's light in both ways? And her brother Finron basically tells her that you can't really know which way to choose until you have touched the darkness. And so, obviously this is probably going to be an ongoing theme throughout the entire series. And all of this whole scene is taking place in Valinor. So just to remind you guys, right, Valinor is the land of undying. It's a place of eternal bliss for the elves. And we've heard of this place before. It should sound familiar to some of y'all if y'all have watched The Lord of the Rings. If not, let's just help you out. It's the place where Frodo, Gandalf, and Bilbo all go at the end of Return of the King. And it's also the place where Elrond encourages his daughter Arwen to go while the wars are taking place and everything like that. But she chooses to remain on Middle Earth so that she could be with her man.
Mm-hmm.
Were you like, did you understand Valinor and where we were and what it
Yeah, I
represented?
understood it definitely. I actually like this dynamic considering I'm not as like versed in. I'm like the true casual fan here when it comes to the storyline. I did understand all of that. All of that made a lot of sense. I wanted to speak really quickly about the discussion about dark and light and the whole you have to
Mm-hmm.
touch the darkness. We don't get
Mm-hmm.
the whole touch the darkness thing until the end of the episode, but it really, as you said, is going to set up probably the biggest theme throughout the story that we're going to see over the next couple of seasons. But it gave me heavy, like serious talking to Harry Potter vibes of like we all have light and dark with inside of us as well to
Mm-hmm.
choose. But I like that this puts like the extra je ne sais quoi on it of just like how you're able to choose what to do is you actually have to get close to the darkness, right? And I
Yeah.
just really quickly want to point out that even though that wasn't explicitly said in some of our other favorite fantasy stories, the two being Harry Potter and Game of Thrones, that the same thing happened with those two main characters. Harry got way too close to Voldemort in book 5 and throughout his journey with like dealing with all that, and he was like, "Oh, I don't like the way this feels. I need to overcorrect and pivot back the other way." And even in Game of Thrones with Jon Snow, he makes his final decision at the end of the series about like spoiler,
Spoiler alert.
spoiler, um, killing Danny. But that was after he got like a real look at like how evil some of her actions can be. Like he was very like kind of ambiguous because it wasn't there in front of his face, and then when he saw it, it was just like, oh no, that's too dark. I need to overcorrect to the light. And I just love that that was like again an extra sprinkle of like okay, like I just
Yes.
articulate it in a way I've never heard before.
Bougie
But
high fantasy.
it was very much like something that I just never picked up on in
Yeah.
other fantasy stories that they laid out beautifully here. So
Yes, and I love those connections you made. That was freaking awesome. I could not have said that any better. That was, gosh, the brilliant mind, ladies and gentlemen, of Dr. T. I love it. So,
so talk to me about who the hell Morgoth is, because that's the first time I ever heard that person's name.
same, same. So in the prologue, right, we find out that Morgoth, an evil god, has destroyed the light in the trees in Valinor. Or yeah, Valinor has these trees. They're special. They emit light. It basically connects to like Middle Earth and stuff. Also, go read up on it, y'all. It's a lot. I didn't try to do all that. But so the elves went to war in Middle Earth because it was like, oh, nah, you can't come through and do this, right? These are trees. So they go to war, and Middle Earth is left in ruin, and this war lasts for centuries. So we
Mhm.
are time jumping even like throughout the prologue and throughout this first episode. So Morgoth is eventually defeated, and the orcs spread and multiply under Sauron. So now Sauron is Morgoth's most faithful servant, and he is like this dark lord sorcerer being person, right? So he's like, oh man, my daddy's dead, so I got to carry out, his mission and everything like that. So Finron, Galadriel's brother, sought out Sauron, but he gets killed by him and is marked by his symbol. Galadriel takes on the mission to hunt down Sauron and has been doing so for centuries. She found his abandoned fortress in the northern wastelands. Now, when we find this fortress, right, it's like, think huge mountain, gusting winds, just total barren wasteland. And the climb, did the climb give you like wildlings and Jon Snow feel?
It absolutely did, and I was waiting for someone to accidentally fall, like what happened with the climb
I was waiting for
in
that
Game of
too.
Thrones. Yeah, it absolutely did. I was just like, yo, the spikes on the shoes, that was clutch to
Mm-hmm.
use it. I was like, that's smart. Never saw that before.
Yeah.
I'm sure they might even do that now today, but I've never seen it before. So.
And also, I wanted to kind of point out because this scene was in the trailers, and I remember people being so worried about the CGI because of the way this scene looked. And
Mm,
like a lot of people described it as looking like video gamey.
mm.
And so when it happens, I was like, ooh, it doesn't look so good. But I was happy that that was the only scene that actually looked like that. did like the visuals kind of take you out of the scene, or you're just
It
like whatever?
didn't. It didn't
Yeah.
take me out of the scene. I was trying so hard to just orient myself as to where they were that I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
focused on the visuals. Maybe on a rewatch, it would bother me a little bit more. But
Mm-hmm.
I was just focused. My brain was just like trying to keep up with understanding what was happening. That it didn't bother me.
Fair. All right. So at this point, um, so at this point in time, Galadriel is the commander of the Northern armies, and her troop is beginning to question her leadership. They won't go home. They're tired. Again, they've been marching for centuries, searching the corners of the earth, trying to find Sauron. So they're ready to go. And when they get to the fortress, they discover that there's a symbol, the same evil symbol that was carved into Finron, and a troll comes out and they defeat the troll. And the troll, yes, troll in the dungeons. So this troll comes running out, and it definitely reminded me of Professor Quirrell in the first Harry Potter film.
Troll in the fortress.
Yes.
Troll in the fortress.
So we actually get a pretty cool fighting scene in which we get to see the troop take down the troll and they defeat them. And after defeating the troll, the group is just like, all right, we are done for real. And we are out of here. Because she's like, we're going to keep marching north. We're getting so close. We got to keep going. And they're like, no, this is it. This is where the journey ends. And surprisingly enough, she actually leaves with them. And they head over to Lindor. And in Lindor is where we meet Elrond. And he's writing a speech for the High King Gilgalad.
These names, boy.
I'm trying to keep up. So I think it's important here to note that Elrond is half elven. So he is mixed race, but has chosen an elven life and has chosen to remain with the elves. And it's funny because we were having this conversation, and this is not something that you knew.
I didn't know this until I saw you write it in the outline, and I was like, wait a minute, that wasn't clear to me in Lord of the Rings or any of or even when I read The Hobbit, which was a while ago, to be honest. I don't remember if they mentioned it there, but when you wrote it, I was just like, wait, this puts a separate spin on like how I was viewing Elrond's relationship with his daughter from the Lord of the Rings movies, which we don't have enough time to go into right now. Maybe we'll do that at a later episode. But I just thought it was an interesting factoid to know. And so it makes sense as to like why they wouldn't even let him be part of the council, because he's not fully elf, is my assumption, right?
Right, exactly. Because they're like, hey, we having a meeting, but just want to let you know you're not invited. Lord elves only. You can't sit with us.
Basically.
And we're assuming that's because he is of mixed blood. And also something to know is that when you are of mixed blood and you're elven, you get a choice. So you can decide to stay with elves or you can decide a mortal life. And his twin brother, Elros, hope I said that right, decides to choose a mortal life. But he lives for centuries. It's not like the man's going to die at 50. So, you know, he still has an extended lifespan, but obviously not in the same way that the elves do. And they are not regarded as elves or accepted as elves in their community, basically, and everything. Because, you know, this is the stush race. This is the
pure bloods only
type of thing. All right, so while in Lindor, Elrond is informed of Galadriel's arrival, and the boy is excited. Clearly, they have some sort of history. They have a friendship. They go way back, right? And although Galadriel disobeyed the High King by not returning on his orders, she is still being honored. Her and her troops are still being honored, right? So the king wants to assure his subjects that the days of peace have begun. There will be no more fighting. Sauron is gone. We are happy. We are good. Sound familiar, right? Basically any fantasy story. The evil is gone. We are fine, right? And so he rewards the soldiers by allowing them passage back to Valinor to retire. Now, Galadriel don't look so happy about this. She is not feeling it at all. And while they are on the ship heading there, the gates are opening. Everybody's singing, the light is shining, and she's just like, nah, and jumps ship, literally into the ocean.
How do you feel? How did you feel about seeing that process? Like the process you've read about and like heard, people talk about in Lord of the Rings. You actually got to see what that looks like to go back to Valinor.
It was great to actually even see it to begin with in the beginning scenes, but then also seeing like, yeah, okay, because like we just see them get on the boat and the boat starts sailing in
Mm-hmm.
Return of the King, but like seeing how it actually approaches, how it looks like this heavenly realm, like
Mm-hmm.
it's this whole thing, it's this whole process. I was just like, this is pretty cool. I am here for it. Did
Mm-hmm.
it do anything for you? Just like,
I was like, this is cool. This is like, it gave me so sailing into the night and like sailing to heaven is I feel like a trope we've seen in other places. We've seen something similar, and this is gonna be really left field, Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't
mm-hmm,
know if you remember the second movie at the end, like or beginning, I don't know, whatever. They were going to like save Jack Sparrow from Davy Jones' locker, like from death, and
mm-hmm,
they like used the boat to do it. Something similar
mm-hmm.
happened there. And then even in Egyptian mythology, a lot of the afterworld life, we saw some of it in Moon Knight, spoiler, has to do with a boat traveling to like the lands of the reeds or whatever it was in Egyptian
Sailing through the
mythology, but
reeds, yeah,
sailing through the reeds, yeah, but like sailing to heaven. So I thought
yeah.
that was like really interesting. Again, I'm all about like connecting different stories together. So I thought that was pretty cool. But it
Yeah.
was obvious. Like honestly, the scene dragged out a little bit because I was like, she's gonna jump. Let's just get to it.
They had to make it suspenseful. First, you see the feet backing up slowly. Homeboy's like, "Take my hand," and she's like, "I don't think so."
Did you wash your hands?
All right, let's get to the Harfoots, y'all. So we meet the Harfoots, who are basically the nomadic ancestors of the hobbits. They're halflings living off the land, hiding from all other people. And they are very concerned about seeing travelers this time of year. I'm not sure why. They don't quite explain it, but it's something that's supposed to be out of the norm. So I'm curious to get your thoughts about how we meet the Harfoots and that whole like opening sequence of them like hiding and all that stuff.
I thought it was really cute. It took me a while to connect that they were ancestors of hobbits. But eventually I got there. I was like, okay, like these feel like they're just super old hobbits. I kind of liked how religious the group is. Like the main dude is, I don't know names, so I'm just gonna go by descriptions. The main dude was like kept consulting his text to like see what was supposed to be happening at the time, all the omens, and this is bad signs, and yada yada yada. And I think part of their religion or spirituality or just the way they live their life based off of these omens is they live their life by seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so timing of when things happen is really important to them. And I think that plays to your point about the travelers, right? Like they're used to
Mm.
seeing travelers, but it usually happens later in the year. And because
Mm.
they're so adherent to like the way the seasons change and harvests and having to be nomadic and everything based off of what's available to them, based off of what they're able to gather, to see these travelers so early means that something's off. And that
Yes.
freaks them out,
Yeah.
basically. So
Fair.
it was fun. This feels like the most religious group we've seen, and I've seen at least in my interactions with the story at large.
Hmm. Yeah, they seem very in touch with like the land and like you said, the seasons and everything like that. Have you ever seen the movie The Borrowers?
I have, but I don't remember them. But it gave me strong vibes. I thought about it too. I don't remember the storyline, but I remember being like, "Oh, that's the movie that had the actor that played Arthur Weasley."
That's it. Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
that's
he's one of
cool.
the main borrowers. Yeah.
That's
Why do I know that? I
cool.
don't know why I know that,
I
but
don't know. I'm glad you do.
yeah,
So yeah,
strong vibes.
basically the borrowers are like little, shrunken people who live in our world, but like they live in the walls and in the floors and everything like that. And
Yeah.
it just reminded me of that because like after the travelers passed by, like everybody starts like coming out of their camouflage and their holes, and you're like, oh, I thought that was a bush, and it was like, no, it was them hiding and stuff. And I thought that was great, and I thought it was a really fun sequence, I think, to meet them because uh, they are supposed to be very much like a lighthearted people who stay out of the way. They are not involved in all of the politics and nonsense of men and elves. And
Mm-hmm.
they even mention the Ents, right? They say trees, right? And
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I was happy to be with them, and they definitely tried to make sure that you knew they were hobbits when they zoomed in on those hairy ass feet, and it was
Yeah,
like, just
that
in
and
case you
like
forgot.
and there's the air of like that ain't our business is
Mm-hmm.
the same with hobbits as well. Like hobbits is like
Mm-hmm.
we eat six breakfasts. I got that right. It was six
Yes,
breakfasts or six
or
meals,
six
whatever it was.
meals.
Six meals. Like we excuse me. No,
We
this.
smoke our pipe weed and we eat 6 times a day, and
We
we might
eat
have sex.
potatoes a lot of different ways, okay? Like that's what we need to be focused on, not
Boil
what's
them,
happening
mash them,
outside of.
stick them in a stew. Yes. All right. So as we meet our Harfoots, we meet our most important ones, right? So we're introduced to Nori Brandyfoot and her BFF Poppy Proudfellow. I love these names; hilarious to me. So Nori is an adventurous and curious kind of gal, which basically goes against the nature of the Harfoots, right? Y'all supposed to mind your business, stay out the way, do all that stuff. She is hopping fences, stealing blueberries and blackberries and everything like that, and doing all the things. Sadik Burrows, which is the guy who you were referencing before, which,
Oh,
by the way, y'all, Black Hobbit. Uh, so he's the Harfoot elder and realizes that something ain't right in the stars. Something is off. Something is going on. You know, there's always that one person in the story who's like, this don't feel right. And I'm happy it's the black man who's like, the air don't smell right. Something's wrong. Something's afoot, right?
this is not the first time we'll get that in the first black person being like something about this not right.
Right.
We're gonna see it again.
Yes. Um, and as we are with the Harfoots, we see a comet crossing the sky. And when it lands, Nori and Poppy discover it, and it actually was a male being, right? And we're just like, who's this? I don't know, right? But very weird, very odd, and they plan on keeping it a secret. And that's how their storyline ends for this first episode. Now, let's head over to the Southlands, the land of men.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is the land of men, which is actually being occupied by elves since the wars began. So it's clear that there's tension between these two races. You can see it throughout all the interactions that happen. And it's revealed that men who stood with Morgoth are from this area, which explains all of the tension, right? We're introduced to Arendir, an elven soldier. How are you feeling about our first Afro-Latina elf in this world?
I'm with it. I mean, there's no. I mean, I don't want to say I didn't see race. Obviously, I saw it and I appreciate it. But I don't think so. The one thing I did want to bring up is like even CNN reported that people are losing their minds about black actors being casted in this show. Like people are so angry. People are saying that it's against the lore. No, some people are just like it's against like historical accounts, and it's just like elves don't exist. What are you talking about? First of all, second of all, oh, it's against the lore. Who cares? Like, who cares at this point? Like, the people who have rights over the story obviously sanctioned it, so just get with the program or don't at this point.
Right.
And honestly, it's not taking away from anything about the storyline, and it's providing opportunities for individuals like you and I to see ourselves in these fantasy elements. What is the problem?
Right. Because I'm not going to lie to you, when he came on that screen, I damn near lost my shit. Sorry. because I love this story so much, it meant so much to me to see that face and our other faces of color on the screen. And like again, like the elves are regarded as like almost the superior-ish type race, right? In this world, I was so happy to see us being part of that and us reflected in that. And I was just like, I don't know if you're fine because you're just fine or if you're fine because you're an elf in this world that I love. And I was like, I want to see you all the time.
So what you're saying is Arondir can get it.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Well, he might be trying to give it to some human. Might not be you,
Yes.
Nessa, unfortunately. But
Unfortunately.
just to wrap up your point really quickly, you're absolutely right. And like I'll say it again, it took nothing away from the storyline to have individuals who represent as Black or Brown or Latino in these positions. And we'll see in the next episode as well that now we have representation in all three, at least the three of the races so far. We see it in the what are they named? The ancestors of the hobbits, the Harfoots. We see them in the elves, and in the next episode, really quick, not a spoiler, we're about to talk about it. We see representation in the dwarves as well. We have yet to see it in man, which I think is really interesting. But well, we saw that brown girl on the drift that was drifting on the sea.
Yes, we did. Okay.
So
okay.
we did see it there too. Actually, I just So first two episodes. Yes. We've seen people, non-white actors, play roles across all of the races within the story, and the story just feels better in my opinion. Again, I love that like part of Black culture, and I'll say Black culture probably. I mean, I'm Black American and West Indian. Nessa here is West Indian, but I'll also speak for. I'll be confident enough to say that this probably happens in more African-centric cultures as well. We see a Black person on screen, we gonna start attributing some Black habits and like things to them, and it just makes the story more fun for us.
Yes.
As I said before, as Nessa said earlier, the Black Harfoot elder was just like something ain't right.
Yeah.
Same thing happens. Same thing happens with Arondir. He's just like the math ain't math in here because know we love to do some math.
Yeah.
And it just makes the story more fun for us to be able to do that. So
absolutely. But when he did pop up on that screen, I had to ask myself, who cutting that man hair? Who cutting that elf hair? Because that lineup was too sharp. That lineup was too sharp. I was like, okay, because I don't see your brothers around you, so I don't know who's doing his shape up and everything. But
I wonder if elf hair grows at the same rate as man. Maybe he only needs to line up every like 700 years. I don't know.
That would crack me up. That's wild. But we need answers. I hope they give us answers at some point. But we'll see.
You just want to see Arondir in a barbershop chair, just talking about
the elf barbershop. I'm here for it. Give me that spinoff, please.
He's talking about his girlfriend's son that's a pain in the butt who don't listen.
Who don't listen. I'm here for it. All right, so more on Arondir, right? Arondir has forbidden feelings for a human healer named Bronwyn, who has a very racially ambiguous looking son. Now I have to tell you, if y'all ain't seen, I don't know, if you got this far and you haven't seen the show, Bronwyn is a very white looking woman, right? And this boy looks, I don't want to guess on nobody's race and stuff, but she's a very white looking woman.
Sun-kissed, but white. Yeah.
And her son is very racially ambiguous looking. I'm just going to leave it at that. And her son's name is Theo. Right. So the audience learns that there has only been 2 mixed marriages and both ended in tragedy and heartbreak. And we learn this because Arondir's fellow soldier is like, you gonna get us in trouble. I see you flirting. I see you hanging out with her. We know this is going on or whatever is going on, right? Like, you got to chill out. Like, this does not end well. So that's
and by mixed marriages, just to be clear, we're talking about humans and elves, not Black versus white. Just wanted to.
Fair. You're right. There's
layers to these intersectionalities. Like there's layers to these identities. But go ahead.
Let's clear that up. Right. So a message is received that the days of war are over and they get to leave their post after serving for 79 years. Arondir stops by to visit that old thing one more time, but they're interrupted by a man who has a sick cow. Now, this sets them on a mission to Horden, which is Bronwyn's hometown. And Theo finds a sword hidden in the floorboards with Sauron's symbol. Dun, dun, dun. So that is the wrap of our first episode. Any final thoughts about it?
Children are annoying. So Nori and Theo, it's just like if y'all would just listen, then like, come on.
Mm,
But anyways, other than that, I thought it was a good reintroduction to the world, if that makes
hmm
sense. I thought it was, and like I mentioned at the top, it was complex, but I think just the way that Tolkien wrote these stories, you have to be able to keep up. And I thought that this first episode gave us good insight into what that pace is going to be like. Every single time they switched from one storyline to another, I felt they left it at a good point for me to want to return back. So far so good. I think that, thinking about this story going into it, I would assume that would be the biggest hurdle to get over is how do you introduce this type of storytelling to the masses in a TV episodic format? And I think they did that really well.
Yeah, I think you get a clear understanding of who each race is and like their lifestyle and their beliefs. I think they set up very well like why there's friction between certain people, why Galadriel is so hell bent on continuing this mission and seeking out Sauron. Um, you understand people's motivations. So I think it was great. And they do a very good job of trying to orient you in this world, putting out the map, labeling where we are,
Mm-hmm.
and not just leaving it to you to just try to figure out where the hell we at.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they also understand that this can be very confusing, especially to casual viewers. So I think they did a good job at trying to minimize as much confusion as possible.
I'll make one final note before we hop into episode 2. The whole
Yeah.
idea of like having a map serve as a a transition between scene to scene to help the viewer orient themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
also think it's a really smart plot device moving forward because now you don't have to explain how long it takes to get to certain places. For
Mm-hmm.
example, so like if you're in, I don't know where everything is, right? More casual. If you're in Rivendell, no, um, if you're in, crap, what's the name of the City of Men from Lord of the Rings, like the main one with the
Gondor?
tree? Gondor. If you're in Gondor, and then all of a sudden, like at the end of Return of the King, they're in Gondor, they just won the battle, and then all of a sudden, cut to the next scene, we're in Mordor, and Aragorn and everyone is like at the gates of Mordor. If you don't have an understanding that Gondor is actually pretty close to Mordor, you might get taken out of the scene and be like, how'd they get here so fast? Right.
Yeah.
So, but like having the maps, you're able to like, you don't have to explain any of that to the viewer. And then just coming off the heels of the last season of Game of Thrones, I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate when I don't have to question how quickly it takes for characters to get from place to place. That's all.
Because we know they was flying, boy.
Listen, and not on dragons, okay? Because they were moving around the chessboard. Anyways, any
Yes.
last thoughts before we hop into episode 2?
No, I think you've said it all. Like, take us through episode 2. Let's get to it.
So episode 2 of Rings of Power is called Adrift, and let's start with Galadriel. So after she jumps off the ship heading to Valinor, Galadriel is now lost at sea. She's found by drifters after a shipwreck, who quickly discovers she's an elf and they ain't having it. We see more of this animosity between elf and man. I'm sure we're going to dig a lot more into that in this series. While they're drifting at sea, a big sea creature, I think they called it a worm, attacks the survivors, leaving just Galadriel and Halbrand, who both kind of just like separated themselves from the group. They was like every man for himself and then just dipped. Halbrand included, who is a man from the Southlands, who reveals he's escaping orcs. A
Mm-hmm.
storm blows through, and Galadriel and Halbrand have to work together in order to survive.
They can't catch a break on this boat.
They really
craft.
can't catch a break. The one thing I wanted to mention about this dynamic that we're seeing on the screen is like
Mm-hmm.
so much prejudice, so much animosity amongst the two races, so much distrust. Galadriel would not share with them what they were doing. Even the
Mm-hmm.
men were kind of just like, we're not going to tell you what we're doing either. Like, get out of our face, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But Halbrand, being, I guess, somewhat more morally just or heroic, when he could have just let Galadriel die, he didn't. He went and saved her, which I think is going to set up some level of uh I don't know. Like I can totally see them like being the beacon of like elves and men got to stick together in order to like fight this fight. Like that's what that
Yep,
felt like it was setting up. So
definitely. I think you're right. They're going to form some sort of an alliance, I think, moving forward. And that'll be interesting to see how everybody else receives that.
so quick question about Galadriel before we move on to back to our dear boo Arendir. Um,
Hmm.
Galadriel, to your knowledge, does she have a paramour? Does she have a love interest at all? Like,
Not that
I
I
guess the
know of.
question is, I guess the question is, could we foresee her and this dude kind of like,
Having a
I don't
love
know, getting,
affair.
I don't know. It would track with the whole elf and humans don't mix thing.
I wouldn't be mad at it, but as far as I know, and I don't know much about her to be honest, and I haven't had the time to do the research as of yet, but I don't know. Because when
Mm.
we see her in the Lord of the Rings movies, there's no mention of children, there's no mention of somebody ruling next to her, so who knows? Who
I
knows? But
mean,
maybe
I don't want to put that on her if she doesn't want it, but I'm
yeah.
not trying to. I don't, she's Arya Stark or Rhaenyra Targaryen. I don't want to force marriage on her, but
Right.
seeing them together at the end of their episode, at the end of their scenes, I was like, this maybe there could be something. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways,
We'll see.
let's head over to Arendir's. I mean, sorry, to Halbrand's homeland, the Southlands,
Mm-hmm.
where in the town of Horden, Arendir, the elf, and Bronwyn, the human, man, woman, person, they discover. Shut up. They discover a tunnel. It's hard. Okay, listen. It's hard to say. Like I want to make sure that we are articulating who belongs to which race of
Race. Yeah,
creature, and
fair.
that's what that was. That was like,
Yes.
okay, like Rowan is a man, but she's not a man. She's a woman. She's like whatever. Anyways, she's a
Yeah.
human.
Yes.
So Aaron Deere decides to follow the tunnel to figure out what the hell is going on, while Bronwyn heads back to her village to warn the people that something is going on, and they need to leave. They don't believe her, and essentially insinuates, I don't know if you caught that like we all know that you like at least like that elf dude, and so you're suspect. Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't trust you at all.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes back to her house where she discovers a huge hole in her floor that's been ripped apart. Theo, her son, is hiding in the walls and tells her to run for help. Instead, Bronwyn hides as a mysterious noise is coming from the hole. An orc appears and attacks Bronwyn and Theo. They kill it and bring the head to the others as proof. Meanwhile, Arendir is also abducted by an orc in the tunnel that he was following.
Mm-hmm.
So, was it obvious to you that there were orcs in the tunnels or that an orc was going to pop up at some point soon?
I knew something was coming because I just felt like there were all these clues being laid out. I I don't think I put it together like, oh yeah, orcs are living underground in the tunnels under this. But I was just like, something is clearly not right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just waiting for that mystery to kind of like reveal itself for sure.
Got
What
it.
about you? Was it obvious to you?
It wasn't obvious that it was an orc specifically, like you mentioned, but I was like, I know orcs are around, right?
Yeah.
And the whole like the mice were keeping me up at night. I was like, there's no mice. Like, just stop it. Like,
Well, we do find out there are rats. It just wasn't
yeah,
them that was making all the ruckus.
yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of confused me a little bit though about that was like the orc has been chilling underneath the floorboards for a while now.
Yeah.
What stopped him from just busting out before? Like, why wait until
Maybe they're
um
waiting on orders.
oh, maybe.
I could just
And
be
be
waiting
and
on.
because and Theo just like, accelerated that particular orc's um duty to have to like just take them out because they found them out. That makes sense.
Yeah, because like we get all these clues, right? We hear about like poison grass in the east, and then the sick cow shows up,
Hmm.
at and has this black like muck or whatever coming out of its udders, and then the rats, quote unquote, the rats scratching in the floorboards. So we see that they're setting us up for something. It just did not all the way click in my mind, like, oh yeah, there's orcs here. But it was, I think they did a great job of like making it creepy and
Mm-hmm.
scary and like, cause like when Theo goes to town on the floorboard and then makes that little hole and then you just see the eye, I was like, ooh, oh, I want so, or you know, when Arendir is getting chased in the tunnels, I was just like, damn. I was like, this is getting kind of close. I was like, y'all can't take my baby out, not just yet, please. We
They
just
can't.
got here.
I know they can't feed into the trope of like the black person dying at the beginning of the horror movie.
Yes, I was like, we can't do this.
That's funny.
No, not yet.
That's funny. I mean, to be fair though, for me, it felt good to see an orc on screen. I was like, oh, okay, like I understand this. Like this is cool.
Right? Yeah. Gotcha. I was just like, I need everyone to survive because I need Theo to find out that Arondir is his dad. Like, I need that revelation.
They set that up so plain and clear.
I was like, this boy's very brown.
No, but also they had his friend be like, "You don't even know who your daddy is," and it's like, "Well, duh, his daddy's right there."
Yes. It was like, we've been hearing about your mom canoodling by the water well
Right.
with that elven guy, and you don't even know where your dad went. And I was just like, he's right here.
Very obvious. Very, very, very obvious.
All right, where are we going next?
We're going to stick with the elves, but we're going to go over to Elrond and like follow him a little bit. So, the great elven smith Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor. I'm going to butcher all these names.
Celebrimbor. It's pronounced like a K, like Celebrimbor.
Whatever. The big blacksmith architect dude tells Elrond he wants to build a new powerful forge, right? Yeah. Elrond suggests asking the dwarves. Basically, he wants to build a forge, but he's like, we don't have enough men, and I need to do it by spring. Mm-hmm. Why we need to do it by spring is never explained. Mm-hmm. I was just like, oh, why spring? Why the rush if we're in peaceful times? What's the deal here? Mm-hmm. So there's that. And so, you know, he's like, we don't have enough men to do it. So how are we going to figure it out? And everyone's like, yo, I got peeps in the back. What you mean? Let me call my boys from across town.
I know somebody.
I know somebody. Let me call my boys from across town and see if they want to get in on this money. That's essentially what he said. So Elrond goes to talk to the dwarves. They visit Prince Durin the Fourth in Khazad-dûm. They are old friends, but Durin and the other dwarves are not welcoming at all. Durin is pissed because Elrond missed his wedding and birth of his 2 kids over 20 years. We were reminded that elves live for so long that sometimes they forget the importance of little things. Like 20 years is a blink of an eye in the elves' eyes, as Durin said during the show. Prince Durin's wife, Disa, who is a hoot and a half, convinces Durin to hear Elrond's proposal, basically. Mm-hmm. So just a couple of things here that my beautiful co-host Nessa kind of like wanted to remind the group that Khazad-dûm, where Prince Durin lives with all the other dwarves, is the same place as Moria, which anyone who's watched the Lord of the Ring trilogy, especially the first 2 movies, should be familiar with, because that was where the Fellowship had actually went through the bottom of the mountain in order to get through to the other side. It's where the Balrog lived. Balrog, the demon thing.
Yes, the fire demon thingy. You shall not pass. That's where that famous scene took place.
Yeah, that's where all that happens. Except now we're able to see it in its grandeur, right? Like when it's live and popping, basically. It's prime. Right. So just wanted to call that out really quickly.
And it looks beautiful.
So pretty. I love seeing how, because you wouldn't think there'd be vegetation in the middle of the mountain, right? But you saw how they were using big mirrors to reflect sunlight. I thought that was so cool to see.
So clever, so beautiful. I was happy that we could see it in its prime, because when we see it in the Fellowship of the Ring, it is a tomb. Everybody's dead. It's run down. This demon is living here. Orcs running it, trolls, everything, right? So it was beautiful to see it at its prime and see how lively that it can really be. It was great. I was happy. I enjoyed it so much.
How do you feel about the Elrond Durin dynamic? Like, to learn that elves have this beef with man, but is there a beef with the dwarves? Is it common for them to be together and like be friends? Like, I'm just, as a casual fan of the
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings story, is Elrond and Durin's friendship rare? Is my question.
I believe so, because even when we get to Lord of the Rings, right, there's this beef immediately between Legolas and Gimli. So you kind of get the sense that elves don't really F with nobody, honestly. And so the fact that they do have this friendship, and I thought it was so funny that, because like when he was rejected, I was just like, oh, they just don't like elves. But to find out that it was literally because you missed my wedding and you missed the birth of both my kids, you didn't send no cards, you didn't send no baby shower gift, you didn't send nothing, you didn't come to the bachelor party. My boy was pissed, and I was just like, oh, that's really funny.
How
But
relatable is that, though?
relatable.
How
And
relatable?
yeah, so it was interesting to see that they literally do have this history, or enough of a history that Durin was like, why were you not around for these things? I know 20 years means nothing to you, but for us, and mind you, dwarves live for quite a while too. Not as long as
Mm-hmm.
elves, but they live for quite a while too.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, I know 20 years means nothing to you, but to us, it means a lot. And for you to miss all these things sucks. Like, it's terrible. And it's Disa, Durin's wife, who has to convince Durin to be like, man, at least hear him out. Y'all are friends. Sometimes these things happen. We drift apart, but we can always come back together. So it was nice to see. Also, Elrond, a smooth talker.
Mm-hmm.
He's a smooth talker, because the way he got himself into Khazad-dûm in the first place was invoking some sort of rite or whatever, which is basically a rock smashing competition. And the loser has to be banned. And even though he loses, he still talks his way into dinner. Does
He
that
throws the fight. He throws the fight.
right? Does that give you a different, like, does that make you look at Elrond in a different way or see a different side from him?
Elrond is a politician, is
Mm-hmm.
what I got from all of his scenes, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
he was able to successfully talk Gal, these damn names, Galadriel. He was
Yeah.
able to successfully talk Galadriel into not like being even more insubordinate to the king, right?
Mm-hmm.
And convinced her to get on the boat, and she did. He was able to recognize that he wasn't going to get anything done in the middle of that like contest with Durin. So he threw the fight so that he would have the opportunity to speak with Durin one on one,
Yeah.
right? Like, Elrond is a politician through and through,
Mm-hmm.
is what I got from that.
He's a clever man. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just again, really quickly, nice to see Disa, a woman of color or a character of color, as the princess of Khazad-dûm. And I just like that, like, her personality felt like an auntie at the cookout
It
to me.
does.
It was
It
just like, oh yeah, there's somebody like that in my family. Like, just
so lovable and
right,
warm, and
come eat.
yes.
Didn't I tell you how to go to bed? Like, excuse them. Just sit down. We gonna eat, and they gonna go to bed. Like, just very like, I get it. And then the other thing I wanted to mention really quickly was during planting the seeds of the sapling and
Mm-hmm.
nurturing, and the comment she made about like that tree being like their third child. I thought that was super sweet.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Elrond is clearly beloved in this realm. Like, just by like, he has a way of, I don't know, of forming these friendships and like long lasting relationships as well, which I'm sure serves him pretty well going into
Mm-hmm.
the future and everything. So,
Yep. So let's pivot really quickly. So we've
yes.
now talked about Galadriel, who we know from the Lord of the Rings trilogies. We know Elrond. Now let's go back to the Hartfoots, Nori, and this like mystery like sky person.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is going to be, I think, a lot of what this series is going to be like when it comes to introducing new things that we've never seen before on screen. Who is this stranger person? Let's get into it. So
Right.
Nori Hartfoot approaches Brandyfoot, part of the Hartfoots, approaches the being who fell from the sky and reveals that the fire is not even hot. Like, it looks like a meteorite that hit Earth, essentially. Um, So we can't help but think that about the fire not being hot in the northern wastelands back at Sauron's fortress as well. This is the
Mhm.
second time now in 2 seasons we've seen fire that's not hot, heavy shades of Daenerys Targaryen.
You're like,
Okay,
it's too evil here that we don't
right.
feel any warmth from the fire. So
Mm-hmm.
keep that in
Mm.
mind.
Nori touches the weird cosmic dude and they connect in some sort of way. The stranger doesn't speak their language and appears very confused and disoriented. And Nori and Poppy, they can't figure out who or what he is. So let's do some light speculation really quickly. Nessa, who do you think this stranger person is?
I definitely think he's a sorcerer of some kind. Just because
Mm-hmm.
they're just like, they keep calling him a giant. And I feel like if he was the size of just like an average guy, they would have just been like the man. So the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they keep calling him a giant, he fell from the sky and survived, looked like a comet. Like, I was just like, I feel like he's some sort of sorcerer or wizard or something like that. Um, Possibly a Gandalf. Not a Gandalf like it's a race, but possibly Gandalf or someone along those lines. But that's just what made me think like sorcerer or something. Or is this Sauron?
So I think they purposely want you to at least consider that it could be
Mm-hmm.
Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the most obvious. Like, if it showed up later to be Sauron, it's like, okay, yeah, I got that. Like, there's enough things, shadowy things, and things happening for that to be true. I
Mm-hmm.
also think it's probably more likely a wizard. I did not think Gandalf specifically. I thought just a wizard.
Yeah.
But I think if he was to be a wizard, or at least the descendant of a wizard we know, I was thinking Saruman over Gandalf. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason is because there still seems to be some dark elements to this stranger. And
Mm-hmm.
we know Saruman, who was a wizard, the white wizard and all good and stuff for a really long time. By the time we get to Saruman in the Lord of the Rings, he has now touched the dark side and decided to be there for a minute, which means that obviously that was always in him.
Yeah.
So I guess, as to sum up, I think that it could be Sauron and fine, but that's not really compelling in my opinion. I think it is a wizard,
Yeah.
not a wizard that we know already. I think
Yeah.
the timelines just wouldn't suggest that. But
Totally.
if this wizard is connected to someone we know, I think Saruman would be an interesting wizard to connect him to.
It would
That's
be
what
more
I'll say.
interesting than Gandalf for sure. But
Hmm.
I don't know. I just couldn't help think but have the thought like, could it be? I
Yeah, yeah.
don't know.
So this
Yeah.
stranger obviously wants help. He needs help, and he wants Nori to help him find a specific set of stars or constellations
Hmm.
that she's never seen before. My thing there was just like they need to go to the place on Earth where that constellation is probably visible. Is probably like what I got from that.
Yeah.
So he shows her the constellation using fireflies. Poppy points out that the fireflies died after he kind of uses them to make his point.
Hmm.
And so my question to you is like, what do we think this all means? This is another omen of this individual being evil. Is it, how do you think this is going to play out and like how these individuals move along the map essentially? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think it definitely shows that there's some darkness in him because for you to all you did was arrange these fireflies to make them look like the constellation, right? But now they're all dead or dying. And then we also got to mention that Nori's dad breaks his foot as like some of some stuff for like relating to this stranger, and like it takes us back to when Poppy and Nori were first hiding him. No, Poppy was like, if things start going bad, they are going to blame it on us
Mm-hmm.
because we are doing things out of the norm. We are hiding this person. We don't know what this person is capable of. Whatever happens that goes bad, this is going to be on us. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's all I kept thinking. But I think it's very clear that this person has some type of darkness to him or practices some sort of dark magic.
Mm-hmm.
What did it mean to you?
So I wondered how much of like the fireflies dying were a result of his energy being bad or evil versus just having another being take over your being and that in itself being the evil thing.
Mm.
Meaning, like, he forced his control over those fireflies. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that in itself, regardless of what he had them do, that
Mm-hmm.
in itself was like an intrusion, an abomination, kind of like in the Game of Thrones, again, another, sorry, spoiler, kind of like in Game of Thrones, where we learn that, like, it is an abomination. You do not do it. If you are a warg, someone who can control other living things, you do not do it to other humans. Like, that is
Right.
against the rules. It's just you are violating in a way that is like against nature. Like Voldemort slaying a unicorn and drinking. He's like cursed for, like just all these things of just like you don't insert your power on another individual and take control of them. It's why the Imperius curse was a unforgivable curse. Yada yada yada. So I was wondering
Yeah.
if like maybe it's that aspect of it, of his abilities that like like either drains the energy from the fireflies or like has this effect on Nori's dad, where like I don't know. I don't know the
Yeah.
connection between that specifically just yet. Um, but I do think there's something there of like inserting your will on somebody else's will
Definitely.
that will flesh out over the seasons.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And we can see that they're setting us up to go on an adventure, right? We're going to be traveling. And the question is, are both Nori and Poppy going? Is it just going to be Nori? Like, again, we've got hobbits or these Harfoots, right, traveling with a big tall stranger. So I'm curious to see where we will end up with these folks. Where are we going? Where are these constellations? Um, it's a big mystery, obviously, that we're going to be on the road to discovering.
Mm-hmm. One final thing I'll say about that is that clearly Tolkien likes having hobbits be the adventure people, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he likes giving the responsibility of the journey
Mm-hmm.
to this like little kind of underassuming individual.
Mm-hmm.
Nori kind of annoys me right now in the same way that Frodo did. I'm just annoyed by all of them, honestly. Um, and so I'm not, honestly, I'm just not looking forward to like having more of her on my screen, but I get it. I get that this is now
We
going to
might
be
learn to
some,
love her.
maybe she's just like, sit down. Can you just like sit down?
Always trying to cause trouble for your black mama.
Almost got all the kids killed by a wolf. Why? For some berries? No, go sit down.
Definitely. That was
Um, but anyways,
yeah.
so I just again wanted to point that out that like we see in other fantasy stories, the unassuming person who doesn't seek power, who you wouldn't think, the David to the Goliath individual, is
Mhm.
probably going to be the one to carry a lot of the story. So
Yeah.
excited. Well, I'm intrigued to see how that all plays out.
And I also must say, like, even from these two episodes, it's a very elf driven show
Mm-hmm.
so far. Whereas Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit by name are very much like Hobbit driven, and that's the biggest point of view that you get. This
Mm-hmm.
is more of, I mean, we're getting all different types of point of view, but they are making a strong effort to show us who the elves are,
Yeah.
what role they're playing and everything, where I don't think we really got that so much in Lord of the Rings. It was so heavily Hobbit driven. It was difficult to really put a large separation between men and elves,
Mm-hmm.
other than, oh, they're just different races and stuff, right? But I think they're going to make a conscious effort to be like, these are the elves, this is what they represent, this is what they do, this is why there's so much going on between them and men and all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. But I still think it's smart to have the Harfoots here, for the audience to be like, oh, we're going on a journey, yay, kind of thing. These, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Nori leading us onto this journey.
One final question,
Yes.
and that we didn't talk about. The name of the show, Rings of Power. Where are we when it comes to the rings, right? A friend of mine asked me, he's like, oh, so like, he's very much into the storyline. So I was asking him questions, trying not to spoil it. And he asked me a question. He's like, well, who has the rings right now? And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. I don't think the rings are in play yet in this story. I think what we're going to get is the development of the rings over this first season, essentially. Chekhov's forge, most powerful forge vibes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's going to come into power. So just wanted to kind of just mention really quickly that we don't think the actual rings are in power yet. And I'm assuming that by the end, at least, let's say of the first season, the idea of forging the rings or Sauron, like maybe our main characters will catch wind that that's what Sauron is trying to do right now. I don't know. We'll see. But just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, definitely. I believe that that's part of our journey, right? Is leading up to the forging of the rings. Like this is an event that we are going to see, bear witness to, and we're going to see what leads up to that. And so I think that's going to be an exciting time and a great story to tell, right? Because then we have to eventually get to the forging of the one ring to rule them all. So I'm wondering, are we going to get that in the first season?
I don't think we'll see a ring the first season. Like I mentioned, I think that it would be wild if we didn't at least get to, oh, Sauron's plan is to make rings. Because then why would you even bother calling it Rings of Power in the first season, not knowing if you'll get a second
Right,
season, you
right.
know?
And I kind of want to hop on top of that by saying, oh, but Sauron's plan. I think it'll be clear to the audience that it's Sauron's
Oh,
plan,
yeah,
but
yeah.
not to our characters here. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I think by the end of the first season, it'll be like, ooh, okay, we're getting closer to to creating these rings. If anything, they might end the season with the forge being completed.
Right.
So, and then it's like, ooh, it's up and running, it's functioning, dun dun dun. What's next?
Yeah, I think that sounds right, and this is where we're getting into like us being like fantasy writers, like aspiring fantasy writers ourselves. Yeah, I mean, the first season ending with the Forge being completed, and with the audience having a very clear understanding of the politics amongst the races.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the prime setup for bringing in the actual rings in seasons afterwards, because the whole thing about the one to rule them all is that you have these races that are acting separately and in opposition to each other, and so I'm sure that's going to play into like the dynamics of who gets which rings, how many they get, how they even use the rings, and like all this other stuff. So
Yes, yes. Any final thoughts about this episode or the first one?
I thought they were just good setups for the season,
Yeah,
point
for
blank
sure.
period.
I agree. All right, guys, that wraps up our discussion of the first two episodes of the Rings of Power. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you follow us on our socials at Casual Fangirls underscore. Check us out on YouTube, Casual Fangirls. We will definitely be back with more content as we continue to watch Rings of Power, House of the Dragon, and all other types of content that's out now. It's a lot going on, and we are always happy to be here to talk to you guys about it. I'm Nessa,
And I'm T.
and together we are the Casual Fangirls. We will see you guys next time.